Okay, welcome everyone to today's webinar, Staying Safe in the Lead Up to the Festive Season. Today we're joined by a panel, and I'd like to introduce them all. From Kerr's Hire we have Jared Kerr, from Coates Hire we have Bill Deans, from Hire Express Chris Cooper, and from the insurance broker Kylie Quinn. The way the webinar works is that we have the option for questions and answers. So if you've got any questions during the webinar, please feel free to post these in the Q&A. If you've got any technical difficulties, just use the chat function and we'll do our best to help you out through that, whether it's sound or visual. The webinar is also being recorded, so anyone that misses it or colleagues that you'd like to share this with, you'll be able to do so via our YouTube channel. The topics today we'll be covering are safe work practices and preventing injury. Then we'll move on to staying safe through the summer, looking at exposure to heat, sun, bushfires, and then lastly we'll be looking at the theft prevention over the holiday period. So to begin with, let's look at safe work practices and preventing injury. In the lead up to the end of the calendar year, both employees and employers can feel a lot of pressure to get projects completed before the break. But we want to remind everyone that safe work practices should not be sacrificed. Along with messages from Safe Work Australia, the HRA and the EWPA are urging all members to focus on safety in the lead up to Christmas. It's a busy period for many workers in this time, and sometimes there's increased casual employees or even new employees, and we would ask that employers make a big effort to keep everyone safe in their workplace. The ways to prevent injury are quite varied. People have measures in place such as training and support, adequate staffing levels to balance out the demand, setting realistic workloads and work schedules, having contingency plans in place if work falls behind, ensuring that everyone has regular rest breaks, and looking at any closed sites that are adequately secured during the festive season. By taking all of these steps, we can ensure that it is a happy and productive Christmas for all. And now it's probably a good time to turn over to the panel and see what they think some of the challenges are in the lead up to Christmas. So maybe if you'd like to start thinking about how your company addresses the Christmas period, whether it be rest breaks or the communications that go out to your workers, deadlines and so forth.
Yeah, perfect. So, I mean, just with a small branch scenario with Hire Express, we're only a single branch. I mean, there's not as many policies or procedures in place that you would in Kennards or Coates or larger companies. But it really needs to be front and center and live and breathe it so everyone gets home safe every day. You got to speak up if anyone's doing anything wrong. And if you get any new staff, which is this time of year, it's very busy. So any new staff, you really need to get proper training. Like they're the most likely to get injured without any proper training. So yeah, in a small branch, that's what we definitely focus on.
Well, from the Coates perspective, you know, through the lead up to Christmas or, you know, breakup day, you know, we continually provide communications, both, you know, work related and home related, you know, and just reinforcing the message that it is a hazardous time of year. You know, there's a lot of pressures on getting equipment, you know, ready, and, you know, people treat Christmas Day as there's no day after. So, you know, it's you know, a critical time to just keep focused. We use a pre-start meeting format and a safety action meeting format to, you know, provide different messaging. And look, I attended a pre-start meeting this morning where one of the subjects that was sent out, as I said, to both work and home related, was about, you know, melanoma or skin cancer. And one of the fellows took that communication home, spoke to his wife about it. She went and got checked, found that, you know, she has to have a skin cancer removed. So, you know, it's sort of, it's hit the target where it was supposed to. So. Anyway.
Good. I think some of the messages that go out are applicable not only to your employees, as you say, but also their families and perhaps the sites they're working on. So it is a good time to remind people of some of these key messages. Has anyone seen any changes maybe with the world we're living in, being COVID safe as well, and affecting perhaps the efficiency or productivity around the Christmas period?
I would say, if anything, to make sure that your employees are continuing. We know it's a busy time, but to continue to follow those COVID safe procedures to ensure that the employees are safe, and obviously the business continues to be safe as well.
Time, mate.
That's all right. Welcome, Jared. We're just onto the first topic, talking about safe work practices and also preventing injury. We touched on the importance of adequate staffing levels and ensuring that anyone that's new, casual, or balancing the demand by bringing in people to the business, that they've been inducted properly. I know that Curse High, you've got some good, solid induction processes. Is this something you focus on at the Christmas period?
As I said, I think with any inductions, you really need to focus on it year round. It's not just a Christmas thing, but I think being diligent over Christmas time. We just had a new staff member start this week. He's a transport operator, never done a chain of responsibility. So, literally within his first week, we've got to sit him down and do the actual hire association chain of responsibility course. We just have to find time to do it because it's important. If we let it go because we have issues with, because we're too busy, that's where accidents happen. So I
think it's important for new starters, especially, to have good supervision and a good buddy system as well. And until they gain the experience that's required to work safely in the workplace, a lot of equipment movements, a lot of transport, and everything else. It's a pretty hazardous area to be in for a new starter.
Yeah, particularly coming in at one of the busier times of the year as well, with everything needing to get done. How has the interaction with customers been? Is it realistic that they're putting demands on that you can meet, or sometimes you're having to work with them on new schedules?
My opinion of that is everyone's in the same boat. Construction's busy, people are busy. I had a customer this morning who was getting unhappy because we were making him sign a document. For the legal perspective, we're like, mate, we need to do it. By the time that he whinged and complained about it, we had the paperwork there to sign. It's one of those things where people just need to be patient at this time of year. Everyone's got obligations of family. Part of the reason why I'm late today, and you just got to do the right thing.
And are you finding staff are managing to get that work-life balance right, where they can still finish on time and have the days off that they're rostered to? Are people doing overtime at this time of year? With us, like today, yesterday, I actually had an employee of 19 years tendered his resignation. Massive amount of talent and training. He started working in the business when I was still a hire controller. When now I'm obviously the GM of the business. And he come up to me and said, look, I'm having issues at home. I need to I've got a job that's going to work with my time. I sat down with him today after thinking that I don't want to lose him. That, you come up with a scenario where he can actually finish at 3 o'clock, pick up his kids, and he's got to go back and think whether or not that's the decision he wants to do, stick around with me or go with it. But you've got to adapt. I've got a guy who finished 2 weeks ago because his wife's business is going really well because she's in psychology, and at the moment mental illness is a huge thing related to COVID. So he sort of had to take a step back. I said, well, you've got to think of your mental health. So how about we do an arrangement where he works 9 till 3? He does now, 3 days a week. So you have to be flexible with your workforce, and that comes time at Christmas time. If your guys, everyone's working to the end, everyone's done, they're looking forward to that Christmas break. But if you turn around and keep pushing people, all you're going to do is have accidents and injuries and problems down the track. It's okay to a customer to say, sorry, we can't do it. We want to do it, but we can't. Physically, I don't have the manpower to do that. And you just have to be aware of doing that. If you say yes to everything, well, you're setting yourself up to failure, I believe. Yeah, thanks for that, Jared. I think we'll see what happens after the break. But have you given any thought to looking after staff in terms of flexibility, and perhaps after the pandemic is we've lived through quite an interesting period this last year. Do you see much demand for flexible working, maybe a little bit more remote working from your employees?
You asked me specifically, are you, James?
Oh, look, open to everyone. I know some roles are very operational. You've got to be in the yard, but I think maybe some of them admin roles, people might be having those conversations where they can work from. I
think any boss can't turn around and say no to a person that wants to have a flexible relationship. And well, actually, it's law. It's law. You have to. Fair Work Australia basically says that anyone under any circumstances, which is caring for a person, looking after a person that's related to domestic violence, mental illness, carers, over 55, the discussion has to happen. So you can't avoid it as such. But I think, our business, yes, in rental industries, it is very hard to work from home. You can to some degree, but you need to be able to walk out and see that piece of equipment or discuss that with a customer. It's very hard, but administration roles definitely. But making a work environment that is flexible, that you might have to take some short-term pain and go, okay, I've got a few staff that are, I've got probably too many staff at the moment. But at the moment we're flat out. That's okay. But I'm looking at the future. I sort of, it's funny. I was thinking about it this morning with this agreement. I spoke with my staff members. I look at our team like a football team. And I'll tell you about a football team, the Mighty Cats, who couldn't quite get to the line there this year. But they had succession planning in for the guys that, like say Ablett and all these guys that are Taylor. They said, well, look, come and play another year, but we'll reduce your year. Reduce the amount that you're playing. And maybe that's something to consider, is that you've got these guys that have been around for 10, 15 years or heading towards retirement. They're probably going to retire at some point in time. You go, well, rather than chasing your tail then when they leave, you literally get people in to sort of train them up, get them organized, and then it makes that transition a lot easier. So you have to sometimes take some short-term pain to have some long-term gain.
Thanks, Jared. Yeah, interesting. You're able to build football into safety, but I think there's a lot of experience when people do leave, and that experience goes with them. So to transition out, I think that's a sensible approach. And I suppose, Bill, in a bigger company with multiple branches, you've got to look at the experience levels and in relation to safety and how you're bringing new people in and people are moving on. How are you finding that and maintaining that knowledge?
Yeah, well, look, we've got a lot of long-term employees, and and there is a lot of flexibility, and I've noticed this change over the years in our work requirements. Let's say there's a number of people on 4-day weeks, and the like, to suit their lifestyle, as well as be a valued employee with us as well. I think COVID has changed the description or the demographic of the workplace as well, because there are a lot of roles that ask and can and still work from home at the moment. So I think that's going to kind of it's open up the eyes of particularly our business, I think, of what can be achieved with that flexibility, if you know what I mean. So, and some people may take their children to school and work from home and make up the hours like that and things like that. So it's certainly been a big change in the last 12 months, especially. So
that's interesting. Look, I think we might move on to our second topic now, which is more of an operational one, and it's about staying safe in the summer, whether that be through the effects of heat, exposure to the sun, but also during the bushfire season as well, with the smoke that we had last year. Safe Work Australia have released a 4-step guide, which I'll touch on, but then we'll go back to the panel and discuss how you approach this in your business. So the first step that Safe Work Australia mentioned is planning. That's consulting with your workers, identifying risks, whether that be of bushfires or the heat, and how you can reduce these risks in your business. identify ways of controlling those risks and your workers' exposure to them, looking at ways to monitor conditions and establish who will be responsible for that, and also recording and documenting these risks that have been identified so that the control measures can be put in place. So that's all under planning. Monitoring the environment. That's a difficult one. We can't control what's going on out there, but you can definitely monitor it, whether that be through broadcasts, rural fire services in the various states and territories, the Bureau of Meteorology, even the government departments, Department of Planning and Industry and Environment. They'll monitor air quality as well. And then the UV warnings as well from the weather forecasts and the cancer councils. So that's around monitoring. Two more steps are checking and implementing. So to activate a summer safe plan, Safe Work Australia recommend that you ensure workers are familiar with your plan, that you take steps necessary to protect the workforce for the upcoming season, and also that you check that all required equipment, whether it be PPE or air conditioning or coolers, are all ready to go. The last step, they say, is a review, and this was at the end of the season when you look back and review this with your workers. How well did your control measures work? What could you add to these? What could you improve? What could you have done differently? So probably focusing on the heat to start with, and whether that be exposure, direct exposure to sunlight, or maybe heat within the warehouse. How do you tackle that as we get into this this hot period now?
Yeah, I reckon definitely in a I mean, we're in a big warehouse ourselves, and we've got so plenty of shade, and the wash bays all covered as well. But you just got to be have all the equipment available as well. So anything that's not out and hire, let your staff use it. Evaporative air coolers, portable air cons. Even during the smoke in Sydney that we had last year, in our office, we had a few people who suffered badly from asthma. So we had run air cleaners inside the office. They're a bit noisy, but at least everyone could breathe. So that was really good. So yeah, definitely use what's available.
Thanks, Chris.
Don't be afraid if you have to keep your employees safe to actually not hire it out. I'm not allowed to hire out evaporating coolers. If anyone comes in like, nah, sorry, if they're operating the workshop, they're not going out on hire.
Well, we sent out a communication mid-November about being prepared for the up and coming, hot weather, along the lines of, get out the cooling fans and dust them off, make sure they're all tested and tagged, make sure you're stocked of hydration satchels and, lollipops and the like, or, cool pops. And all that is sort of, up, or in place, fresh water, of course, hats and sunscreen, check the sunscreen in the toilets. If it's last year's, it's probably out of date. So that was the communication in it, like a checklist form. And, my observations from getting around some of the branches that they've all sort of prepared for that really well. And just on the, in the various areas, we're a national company, so we've got, sites that are affected by cyclone and other things. So each site has its own emergency management plan based on the area they're in, whether it be bushfire or the middle of, the CBD or whatever the case may be, they'll all have their various sort of, risk assessments on the area and, the control measures required for the area they're in. So I think it's important to have that emergency management plan based on the location you're in, and just simple things like, the details of the neighbouring properties and their contact details and the like, in case you have a major sort of incident or, event at your branch or location.
I think the number one rule in my workplace is always never run out of Zuba Dubas or get crucified every time. So, yeah.
That's good. And obviously regular rest breaks if people are getting a bit more tired with the heat. Hydration we mentioned as well is important. And yeah, I suppose monitoring the staff. Jared, you would make sure that the rooms that they're using to rest in or lunch rooms are adequately cooled and stocked up with water and
air conditioners in, plenty of water, as I said, air conditioners in crib rooms or lunch break rooms, all that sort of stuff. Look, it's been a hard one, and I think we're lucky where we are now with COVID being a little bit less. We actually have, because of COVID, reduced our guys in the lunchroom together because of that infection. So we've got to be careful that we keep to our COVID safe plan, especially what we've got down here in Victoria. So it's sort of a balancing act to try and find that. Maybe you might have to split your lunch breaks or split your shifts, all that sort of stuff to get that relief. But we've got to be mindful of that, which is still around, but you're keeping areas cool or providing shade areas or that sort of stuff, extra long breaks if people are hot. As Chris sort of said, I always walk around on hot days with an icy pole box and hand them out to people and all that sort of stuff just to keep them cool, keeps them happy.
That's good. I know Bill's touched on all the different scenarios for different parts of Australia that are see different weather patterns, but if we go back to bushfires, and that was particularly bad last year, is there anything you can do to keep your working environment a little bit more smoke free, or how did you tackle that last year, and what are your thoughts about tackling that this year?
We just tried to do more work indoors. That was all we could do, because you couldn't get away from the smoke haze, regardless of where you were. Some of the regional branches obviously were more affected, so we never closed any branches because of it. But I know that in Tasmania we closed Launceston because of floods a number of years ago. So it just depends on what's happening in the local area. So. But the smoke one was hard because it was just everywhere. So. And you've just got to keep an eye on your staff and see if they're not adversely affected by it as well. So.
I think also one thing to touch on is I know one of our participants that's attendees that's watching today had to deal with this situation, and was Victoria last year obviously was decimated like New South Wales was, and this particular company used power generation and had to go out on sites to keep mobile phone towers working and all that sort of stuff. And I think the scary part about that is you're sending your employees into a fire zone. You're sending them into an area where they might not be familiar with, and you're also sending them in there with assets and all that sort of stuff. So I think if your line of work means that you are responding to emergencies, you've obviously got to have your checks and balances in place, be in contact with the local fire authorities, be in contact with the police, so you're not driving yourself into immediate danger. I remember once when I was actually at a wedding in Healesville on Black Saturday, and I was in a car with a person, and they were about to turn the wrong way, and I knew that was where the fire front was. And I think that if I wasn't in that car and pointed them in the other direction, they would have probably driven straight into a fire front. So a lot of people don't know these areas where they're going, so they've got to make sure that they're well informed, especially if they are assisting the fireys or those type of people. So I think that having all that information is definitely important as well.
That's interesting. I know that we've done a lot of work lobbying for hire companies to remain open during the pandemic because we service essential services. So that's been something that we've worked on since March. And through that, we've built up really good connections with the various states and territories and their emergency service departments. But like you said, it's important that your staff or your branch has those contacts as well at a local level, so that you know what you're getting into, where you can and can't go, and plans to keep people safe, whatever's happening, whatever type of emergency. We might move on to our third topic now, which is theft prevention. We know that in the run-up to Christmas, this can be a time when maybe that there is some more theft, and people are under pressure as well with businesses and the pandemic that we've been through. But it is important for hire companies to remain vigilant, and there are some measures that you can put in place. So we'll talk about some of these with the panel. Some of these measures are customer ID systems, identifying who it is you're dealing with, and the checks that you can have in place there. The notice about being wary of cash customers, the use of technology such as CCTV cameras, and also the physical barriers, checking that your property's security fences and that there's no holes or any sort of breaches or spots that might be targeted. So as we come up to periods where some of you might be closing branches, and what are some of the measures that you would put in place to prevent theft?
About this for ages. I'll go off the back and say that if you've got any really expensive apps, GPS GPS tracking is a very important thing. You can set up on GPSs, you can set up things like geofences. So geofences is a location or a bubble around your yard. So if any of your GPSs leave that yard, you get a notification of that. Generally via an SMS. A couple of things that we have on our GPSs is a notification if the battery's disconnected. A lot of crooks are getting now smart and realise that most pieces of equipment have got a GPS in it. So they go and disconnect the main battery. Having a GPS that has its own internal battery allows you to actually get additional time to find that, and then you can go back to the police and discuss with them, that this machine has been stolen because the battery's been disconnected and all that sort of stuff. So GPS is right off the bat is an important thing. I know personally myself in the last 4 or 5 years, I've recovered close to $200,000 worth of plant and equipment on GPSs and caught the crooks in regards to that as well too. So GPSs is a big thing for me. They're relatively cheap, $200 or $300, between $15 to $20 a month per machine. It's pretty good insurance, I believe.
Chris, as an HRA member, you would be using the red alert system. Is that something that you recommend to other members or someone that perhaps hasn't used that before?
Yeah, 100%. The red alert system is just, especially for new companies as well, that doesn't have a massive database like the Kennards and Coates. And when people put out these red alerts, the crooks, they're likely to do it again. Even if they were successful or not, they're likely to try and steal again. So on a number of occasions, we have had something stolen from us, and we put out a red alert, and maybe another branch or another company gets in contact with you saying, "Oh, Joe, that person also stole from us last week." So it's really important to get the message out to the whole industry. When it comes to theft, we're really in this together. So yeah, the red alerts are really important. Yeah.
I think information about who you're dealing with is very important. So any recommendations on the sorts of ID that you're checking, things to look out for, things that perhaps don't add up from anyone?
One of the interesting ones in Victoria, and since it's happened, is it's pretty easy to turn around and get actually a false license. And one of the ones we've had recently is that on a license is looking at, and I'll see if I can get my license to have a look, but you can actually, we've had them before where we've got an indentation that's on our license, and some licenses don't have that. And what we've found, we've actually seen where they've put a clear film over the top and they've covered that photo with actually the person that actually looks like it. So that's someone else's details, but that's that person's photo. So if you actually have a bump on the actual license, that actually is will affect that sticker, but older licenses don't. So checking the expiry date, checking the fact that you can see in my license there that that there's a hologram on that license, right? Checking to see that that's there. Check the edge of the license to see if you can pull off a sticker. The other thing also that most people don't know is there's a barcode on the back of your license. That's actually your license number in a barcode reader. So if you put that into a barcode reader, it actually automatically populates your license number correctly. So those are the type of things. Grabbing your credit card, making sure that the actual signature matches your credit card. That's the other thing. So really 2 forms of identification. I haven't signed my credit card. Sorry, you got a boat license or something, a shooter's license. Checking those IDs, and that's definitely important to actually check those things, especially on IDs and stuff like that. We scan our licenses. Obviously, people do it in front of people. If anyone actually turns around and said, "I don't want it scanned," we said, "Look, we have to do it, but we'll delete it once it's returned." Those type of things you can do. So you just got to be diligent and making sure you're checking everything.
Oh, that's good. And what about the use of technology for whether it be cameras or maybe alarms that are triggered or links to the police. Is there a good place for that at this time of year to get that, make sure that's all working, or perhaps look at new systems?
Yeah, it's always very important with to have high quality CCTV cameras as well. I mean, even if it's not just for theft, for operationally, you can pick up damage or disputes or return times and everything. So they always really help. One time we actually got broken into when we first started the business, or when Alan started the business. And one of the detectives said screamers. So just put screamers all in your warehouse. Like a crook's never going to remember to bring some earmuffs. So that was a really good point, I reckon. So we put screamers up everywhere. Yeah, you know, and with back on the GPS trackers as well. I know Jared touched on that before, but with the geo fences, you could also put it around job sites. So if you are concerned of an excavator leaving a job site, you can put a fence around that, and you get notified when it enters or exits that geo fence. Yeah.
I think the other thing. Sorry. That's all right, Jared.
No, go.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, look. Don't forget about the infrastructure either, you know, so it's great to have a great CCTV system, but if your floodlights or security lights aren't working, it's as good as useless. You know, before closing down the branch for the Christmas break or the branches, check the fencing, check the gates actually bolt to the ground, you know, like the bolts bolt in where the locks are or whatever locking system that's used. You know, just checking the perimeters of the site and all of the doors and windows and everything. You know, that are just infrastructure security, just the basic 101 stuff is, you know, secure and in place. And the other thing about, you know, never leave, you know, dingoes or, you know, kangas or, you know, small skid steer loaders on the trailers. You know, chain up the small gear that you can't put inside, you know. So you're just going to make it, you know, inconvenient for a thief to take the gear. It's as simple as that, because they just like to get in and out real quick, and that's it. So
I couldn't agree with that more, Bill. We call, if you put an excavator on the back of a trailer, we call that gift wrapping. Yep. It's one of the most common ways that it's the easiest way for something to get stolen.
Yeah. Just with CCTV, now I don't necessarily want to plug any products, but we have a product that we use. It's actually called VideoFight, and VideoFight is a motion detector camera that's a motion detector you have in your that's connected to alarm, but it has a little camera on it. And basically what that does is that directly links to a control room. And we have, so if someone walks in front of that actual camera, it sends a little 30-second clip to the control room. The control room, it can say between a certain determined hours, work out whether or not that's an intruder or not. And if he trips multiple alarms, the bonus of that is the control room has the ability to call the police directly, which means you get police response. If police actually find that there's what they call a hot job, they'll basically send police straight away. So where it's better than security guards is that security guards don't carry weapons. They're not in for apprehending. So, and they also, most security guards don't run really fast. So the thing is though, when you have a video, this video alarm system, basically it can tell you that someone's on your site. Now, the CCTV has to complement that. It doesn't replace it. So CCTV is you can actually monitor that and record and see where people have gone and help the police, but it's the best way to get police response in regards to that. If you have an alarm system that goes wow, wow, woo, woo, and it just scares away the people, if you want to catch people at times, it's best to actually keep a silent alarm and actually catch them in the act. And that's the best way you get arrested in that. We have it in all of our sites. And I reckon that our break-ins have depleted over the years because criminals talk, people know what's going on. They look at this stuff, they know this information's in there, and they're less likely to hit it. That's what we've found in our business.
Good, Jared.
Just one last thing I actually forgot about CCTV is more cameras are better. Cameras that take photos of registrations front and back when they're leaving yards. And the other thing also is when you have an office space, infrared cameras don't work. And what Bill was saying, we've got a camera, we've got a LED light, because when it's in color, it's a lot easier to see than a silhouette walking around. Now, we had one particular customer who had a tattoo on his leg. So we had two people come into a break-in. One of them was wearing a full PPE sort of thing, trying to hide his face. One guy ran in and helped him, and he had a tattoo on his leg. So the sensor light inside the office went off, basically took that photo of that guy. The police straight away knew who that guy was because he had a tattoo on his leg. If we had it in the infrared, day, night, and the night mode, we wouldn't have actually been able to find that criminal.
In a likely event someone does get away with something from Kerrs High, which sounds very unlikely with all the systems, how do you deal with the police, and how do you communicate that they need to take some action and make sure that you're not sort of put off to the side and told that it's a matter for you to clear up? And
obviously it depends on the level of theft. So you've got to remember, what is theft? What is burglary? What is actually theft by deception? So theft is someone breaking into your yard. You've got a CCTV, you've got footage, you can see that. Police respond straight away. For burglaries, they actually take burgs more seriously than they take thefts from a yard, interestingly enough. So if someone smashes into your property, they take that more serious than a theft, which is a bit odd, but that's basically what they do. The worst one to kill is theft by deception. And that's where someone walks in and gives you that false identification, pays for something on cash, and they don't return it. So what happens is the police, and especially the lower uniforms, the constables, sort of tend to go, oh, that's a civil matter. That is a civil matter because that person has returned it by a certain date, but you need to get in contact with. That's not, that's not transaction. I go, no, it is. So people, they find a stumbling block. So one of the things that I actually find is that you've got to prove to the police that it's not coming back. And there's ways to do that. Ways to do that is to check on the actual, say, look, that photo doesn't look like the guy on the CCTV footage because our guy's made a mistake. He didn't look at it. Oh, you can see the little plastic on that. Yeah, that's wrong, right? You can do those type of things. I had one where the registration didn't match the registration front of the car, didn't match the registration the back of the car. And the fact, the registration, another one, the registration didn't match the manufacturer of the actual the car. So say, for instance, you can go onto the Vic Roads website, you can search a registration and it will say registration, Ford Courier or what it is, or let's just say Ford Falcon, but it's actually that the car from the CCTV is a Ford Falcon, but you look and it's actually a Holden, Colorado. You go straight away, the police go, that's not the registration, that's a stolen plate. So that's how you can turn around and find that out. Now, I don't want to condone anyone going to someone's yard or sites because it is a risk, but sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you might have to actually look at on the dress. It doesn't make sense, or you might have to suddenly drive by and just check it out. Don't do it in a uniform or a thing. You've got to be careful. Don't get me wrong, but you need to have evidence to go to the police and say, been there, rang the phone, registration's incorrect, the customer's not contactable. All we do is get message bank, this is stolen. And if you have a GPS tracking device, you can turn around and say to me, that customer told me that he was working in Belmont, but he's now in Faulkner. What's he doing there? That doesn't sound right. And if you have that enough information, then the police will go, you actually are right. This isn't a civil matter. This is actually more serious. A couple of things in regards to GPS is that GPSs you cannot issue a warrant based on a GPS location. You need to have evidence to do that. So we had one where a customer hired a machine down here, typical scenario, hired a machine. He actually paid on FBOS card, interestingly enough, didn't know it was a stolen FBOS card, but when you can pay wave now, and some credit cards allow you to do up to $200 or $300. So he paid for it. It ended up in Faulkner. That's probably why I mentioned Faulkner before. We actually had to get an air wing over to see the machine in the backyard. It took a couple of days, but in the end, we recovered it and recovered the crooks associated with that. So GPS alone is not going to get you a search warrant, but it gets you a start. So making sure, and the other thing also, I'm lucky. I know all this information because my sister-in-law's a crime scene detective, and her friend's a detective, so I have it in the Geelong CIU here, so I actually can just call people and go, hey, can you help me out? And it's good. So understand the police that you've got there, know the phone numbers to call, know the right people to call. And I actually do an extra thing for the police. They've got my number, and I help them identify equipment sometimes. We have people ring us up and they go, oh, I had once, you said, oh, you lost a cement mixer. Yeah, I did. Then I walked and had a look at this actual trailer, and I said, well, it's not my cement mixer, but I can tell you that's Joe's trowel machine. Oh, how do you know that? I said, because I sold it to him. And then that links him, the crook, to another job, and straight away the cock's now getting charged with other jobs that they didn't even know that he actually had done. So you've got to get in and help these guys, and then they're more likely to help you.
Thanks, Jared. If we talk about theft by deception, criminals are also using technology now to deceive people. So maybe Kylie, you could give some advice around, if someone's asking to change a bank account from a supplier, that's something that you've seen from an insurance perspective.
It is very common, particularly at this time of year. Thieves are sadly more savvy than they once were, and they understand that the stakeholders in a business are probably going to take some sort of break at Christmas. The traditional protocols for safety around your accounts might not be there. So what we would recommend, obviously there's products to assist you with it from an insurance point of view, but we would always recommend basic safety. Obviously you have your safety of the material assets. So to ensure your bank accounts are safe as well is always great. So just if any of your suppliers or customers change their bank account details and advise you of change of bank account details, having a basic protocol in place to call the regular person that you speak with, not the person on the email, because that could be someone who's being deceptive, and confirm the information. This could save you thousands of dollars. And we always have, every year for the last 4 years, we've had what they call social engineering, which is theft by deception through your bank account, will always happen at Christmas time. So, and this year more than ever, there's been a massive spike in that area. It's just becoming more and more common. So please just have the right protocols in place. If anyone's changing their bank account details, just don't accept their email. Pick up the phone and ring them. If you've transferred the money to someone else, it's not the bank's responsibility if that's gone, because you've changed that bank account information. It's not an error from the bank. You've lost that money.
That's good advice, and yeah, sad to see the rise of that type of theft, but something for people to be proactive about and have procedures in place. If we go back to the physical equipment, what are some of the measures you might have to protect the equipment that is on site? If the sites are shut down, your equipment's out there, is there any sort of prevention you can effect from your operational point of view?
So what Chris touched on, I think GPS is especially in equipment, but it's better, it's more protected in your site than it is actually in their site. So if it is a possibility that they're going to shut down for 2 weeks, get it off site. If it's a small piece of equipment, get it back. You can protect it better. I know it's hard with things like site offices and all that sort of stuff. Well, site offices probably aren't necessarily getting stolen that easy, because when they're on construction sites, they're generally attached to, pergolas and timber structures and all that sort of stuff. So anything that is movable and easy to move, get it back off site. It's not needed. You might as well not charge it for it. Then you can do the service work if you're open over that time or whatever it is, just get it off site. And I think that's a little thing you can do, is just not rely on others to turn around and look after your piece of equipment.
That's excellent.
I think with the GPSs as well, just one thing I forgot to mention before, which we've all touched on quite a lot, but we've used in the past just a portable tracker, a second one that you can put in a unit that you're concerned about. So theft usually isn't, they're going to look for one tracker, they're not going to look for two. So if you hide a second one there, you're most likely to find them if they rip out the other one.
I love that idea.
A good insider tip. Look, I think we've done a really good job covering that topic. Probably when that does happen, you then be turning to your insurance provider, and it's a good time now to reintroduce Kylie from the insurance broker. Kylie will be handling HRA insurance, and Kylie, if you'd like to just maybe touch on a few of the services that you can offer our members, and maybe one or two more things to think about over the year end, the calendar year end.
Great. Well, some of you may know me. I've been involved with the association and the industry since 2002. I am really excited about this opportunity to work with the association more closely. I have my own, it's my business. I have skin in the game, and we believe in service. So we want to be able to be a sounding board for businesses. So not necessarily, whilst we'd love to speak to you about your own insurances, we can always be a sounding board and discuss your existing insurances with you as well. So that way, if you're concerned about something, or just do a quick reference check or an audit just to see if you have the right covers in place. You don't want to find out when you have a claim that you don't have the right cover in place, because sometimes we perceive that we have X cover, and the last thing we want to do is find out that we have Y in the event of a loss. We've designed a great new program for the association and the members, including the party and event sector. And I think that it will genuinely benefit the members, together with the solid team of very experienced hire insurance brokers who'll be behind it.
Don't sell yourself short, Kylie. You actually, literally, your husband is actually in the hire industry as well too, and your experience in the hire industry is massive. So I think partnering with an industry, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing worse than getting an insurance company that doesn't know what they're talking about. And that's the thing. And partnering with Kylie, and obviously there's I think Damien's doing some stuff down here. Maybe, you know, these guys, they know their industry. They're the ones we need to speak to.
Thanks, Jared. You're right. My husband has an insurance, as a hire business as well. And from the point of view that I'm adverse to exposure, I have certainly pulled apart his program many a time, and I certainly know what I look for in an insurance policy for a hire company. So I don't think that there are many people that can offer that from a broking point of view to the industry.
That's excellent. We're really looking forward to working with Kylie, and we'll be sending all of the members information about HR insurance products and services over the coming weeks. I think we've covered everything. We don't have any questions in our Q&A session, but if you do have any questions afterwards, please feel free to email the association and we'll get back to you. A reminder once again that the webinar is recorded, and you'll be able to share that link with colleagues or other branches. Just like to thank the panel today for their time and their expert advice. So thank you to Chris, Bill, Jared and Kylie. And thank you all for dialing in, and we wish you a very Merry Christmas and happy 2021. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Merry Christmas.
Yes.